So recently, Joe Rogan hosted a podcast with a guest by the name of Sheldon Johnson. Basically, Sheldon went on to this podcast to talk about how he changed his life after being released from prison, quitting gangs and drugs, and just an overall advocate for the criminal justice reform. He's also seen here shaking hands with District Attorney Alvin Bragg. But as recently as last night, he was arrested for dismembering and shooting a man. The police even allegedly found pieces of somebody's body in a freezer. Okay, I'm going to be reading an article from USA Today about his arrest. It says here the victim's relationship with Johnson is unknown, but they were able to identify him as a 44-year-old man by the name of Colin Small. Johnson faces charges of manslaughter and criminal possession of a weapon. Police said officers responded to Small Brox's home to conduct a welfare check on Tuesday night and found a headless torso in the apartment. Responding paramedics pronounced the victim dead at the scene, and officials later identified him as Small. Police said Johnson shot Small and dismembered his body. A search of Johnson's Harlem apartment revealed the remainder of the body, the arms and the head inside of a freezer, the outlet reported. "I'm innocent," Johnson shouted as let out of a police station after his arrest. Apparently, he's going to court on Monday for these charges. People are saying on Twitter that the victim's neighbors heard him begging with Johnson before 2 shots were let off. Also, surveillance shows Johnson leaving his apartment with a blue bin multiple times in multiple different outfits. That's the bin where he stored the body parts in the freezer. So today we're going to be watching this Joe Rogan podcast of Sheldon. See how poorly aged some of the stuff he is saying here is. Also, just so we can get a little bit of background on him.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
So Sheldon starts his podcast off talking about how he got caught up with a gun charge and gave his drugs to some associate to basically sell for him while he was in prison. His case ends up getting dismissed and he comes out looking for his money for the drugs that were sold, and they won't give him the money.
I need my money. It's just me being honest. It's just me being straight. You know, I gave you something, and we had an understanding that you were going to pay me. And when I came home, when I finally located this particular individual, he had his girlfriend with him. And this guy owed me $5,000 for some drugs that I gave him on consignment. I gave him an eighth of a kilo, which is 125 grams of cocaine. And when I saw him, he had a bunch of jewelry on. He was with his girlfriend. She had a bunch of jewelry on. And I said, "Hey, man, where's my money at?" "Oh, yo, I was going to pay you." And as far as I was concerned, his jewelry we was even. So I robbed him. And I took his jewelry. And his girlfriend happened to be there. And unfortunately, she got caught up in the situation. I had a bunch of young guys with me, and they robbed her as well. And he got hit in the head with the gun right here on the side of his head, and he got 2 stitches. And they gave me 25 years for that case.
Did you hit him in the head?
No. One of the guys that I was with hit him in the head.
So what he just told you was how he originally got locked up for 25 years. The prison sentence he was just let go from last year in 2023. Which is, guess what? Another fatality. Like, this one sounds like typical street gang, but the recent one is like Jeffrey Dahmer type. Breaking Bad, get rid of the evidence, acid bath. Like, what were you doing with it, chilling it in the freezer, bro? If you got caught up in the 90s for a murder, they definitely catching your ass in 2024 for one. What the hell?
And he identified me in a photo array, unbeknownst to me. He identified me in a photo array. This guy, you know, as far as I was concerned, he was in the streets just like I was. So
right.
I didn't really understand that, you know, like I said, we go back to morals and values and principles and how warped they can be, right? In my mind at the time,
you mean currently?
This is a guy who I gave something to. He's living an illegal life. I'm living an illegal life. So as far as I was concerned at that time, it was fair game. In hindsight, as I moved on and I became more mature and I began to reevaluate myself, I realized how wrong that was. But that was later on.
Police make an arrest after a human torso and foot were found inside a building in the Bronx.
The suspect has been identified as Sheldon Johnson.
Super providing me with these surveillance pictures inside the building that allegedly showed Johnson carrying bags in and out of the apartment building the day of the murder and changing his clothes several times, as well as wearing disguises.
He goes on by saying the guy who snitched on him, he leaves him alone. And recalls of another time somebody else owed him some money. It was a Spanish guy who was selling drugs out of an auto repair shop. Sheldon said the guy owed him around $7,000, so he roughed him up a little bit, but he didn't really get get that harmed and took all the drugs that the drug dealer had. He continues to keep up this front about how that was right at the time, how it was fair game and permissible to do in his mind. That's how he felt only during that time. He says in December 1997 he was charged for that and the robbery of the guy at the auto repair shop, but the case was dismissed for the repair shop and they proceeded on the big boy charge. He said he was dealing in and out of court and went to Rikers Island, and that's when gangs started to get involved. You know, if you hear anybody talking about Rikers Island, it's just not going to be good. How did nobody see this coming? What man goes to Rikers Island and comes out for the battle? This is not going to happen. It's a myth like Playboi Carti's album.
Going to court. I'm going back and forth to court. I'm on Rikers Island at the time. It's just crazy on Rikers Island. I was blood. This is where the cut comes from on my face. I have a bunch of stab marks. Warring with other rival gangs, mostly Latin Kings and Inietas. I told the judge I would take 15 years right now. He refused to accept my plea offer, and I went to trial, and then I ended up getting 50 years. 5-0. And
So they give you 25 for each case? Is that
25 for each case. I remember like blowing trial and just not really understanding like what was being there, but not like, it was like almost surreal. And I remember when I went and got sentenced and the judge said 50 years. Now, mind you, I had a black lawyer, a black judge, and a white prosecutor. He said he went into all of these reasons why he was sentencing me the way that he was sentencing me. He just called me a menace to society, and he gave me 50 years. When I first got to Downstate, which is a processing facility, and they give you what they call is a time computation sheet. And on the time computation sheet, it gives you all of the numbers, like the beginning of your bid, how much jail time you have. And I just remember 2049. That's all I kept looking at. Are they fucking serious? This is 1998, 1999. And I remember going to the law library and something just says, look up the life expectancy. And I look up my life expectancy. And as an African-American man, my life expectancy at that time was 67 years old. And I did the math. And I said, I'm going to die in prison, man.
Come on, Sheldon. You should be proud of yourself. It's not that bad. You told yourself in 1999 you were going to die in prison, and look at it. It's the year 2024, and you're going back to prison to die in prison. You've made it, man. If it's one thing we can learn from Sheldon, it's about manifesting your reality.
I just really believed that I was going to die in prison.
See, once you believe it, you achieve it.
One thing I learned really, really quickly when I got to prison was that prison does two things to you. It brings out the best or it brings out the worst. And what I saw individuals who were at their worst, and I saw guys who were at their best. The guys who were at their best were guys who were involved in education, post-secondary education programs. They were running the program. They was running the violence groups. They was running the substance abuse groups. And I remember saying to myself, I want that. And I remember just being involved in so much bullshit because I was in a gang, and I was top of the food chain. I had my own nation, and I was just in and out the box. Solitary confinement, which has been considered as unconstitutional now. And I remember just having these moments of reflection and just asking myself, like, what are you gonna do?
Surely not get out of prison to harm somebody else.
I had lost all my privileges. They took everything from me. I was in Southport at the time, which is closed now. It's a solitary confinement facility in New York State. And I was on a loaf, which is also unconstitutional now. So the loaf is a dietary restriction that they give you. It's a chunk of bread, and it has cabbage and carrots in it, and they give you like a quarter of a cabbage, and they give you a cup of milk. When they can't take any more of your privileges, this is what they would give you. 6 days out the week, on the 7th day, you would get a hot meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then it would go back for 21 days. They would do this 6 and 1, 6 and 1, 6 and 1. And it was at that moment where I really said, I have to change my life. I have to change my life. I just can't do this. I had a wife. I had family still. My son was growing up. He was hearing stories about my so-called notoriety, and I just didn't want to be that dad.
I hate to break it to you, Sheldon, but you've been that dad. You are that dad, and you always will be that dad. And now that wife of yours, let's just say because you call out for work doesn't mean somebody else won't call in.
I did 42 days on the loaf. I went from being 210 pounds to like 168 in like a matter of 7 months. Deflated me. And when I got out, I made a decision that I was going to walk away. And I didn't care about what the consequences was. And I said to myself, I've been doing bad for so long, I'm going to try to do something good.
So they starved you for 42 days. You got out of solitary confinement and committed your life to good. But within less than a year from being released from prison, you caught another body. You're on King Von status right now. You know, I can't tell if this guy's actually being genuine, if he really tried hard at being something better than himself and just failed. But I can't imagine one scenario where I would need to chop a body up, store it in the freezer like it's a box of Eggos from my recent Walmart trip. I don't know if he had like a PTSD episode or what. I'll tell you guys what, if this video does like over like 1,000 or something, I'll do like a follow-up on this case, like eventually when the story develops. Because I am actually curious into what happened, like how did it get this far, like what drives a man to this point. Like this podcast is only from last month. What happened in between that time?
If all else fails, I could always go back to doing bad.
Ooh,
but let me try.
That didn't age well.
Let me give it a shot. And I ended up getting to school program. I got my GED. I left the gangs alone, which was a benefit for them because, you know, I was what you call an authoritarian. I was a rule guy. I'm still a rule guy. I like rules. You know, I like rules. I like structure. I like things to be a certain way.
And evidence shows you also like the human body structure.
Plus, I knew a lot of the guys who were at the top.
Why was it to their advantage to get rid of you?
Because I was the type of person who would say, you doing that for what reason? Nah, you can't do that. The rule says that you can't do this, you can't do this. This is what the rules say. And
the rules of the prison or the rules of the streets?
Of the gang. The rules of the street. Yeah, there was rules.
Give us a for instance.
Okay, so for instance, I could be in a whole nother facility. Let's say I'm in Greenhaven and a guy's in Attica and they want to do something to him because they feel like he's not sharing his proceeds of drugs that he's bringing into the facility. The rules say you can't do that. That's his property. That's his belongings. So I was a rule guy, and they just, you know, it was to their advantage to get me out of the way. So when I decided to take a step back, they were like, yes. And it was to my advantage as well. And this was in 2005. So
there was no resistance?
None. And at that time, this is where a lot of the what they call set tripping began. The organization began to implode on itself.
The gang organization.
The gang organization. There was a lot of infighting, sets against sets, and I was just always against that. And it was time for me to go, and I didn't care whatever the consequences was. I was fortunate that there weren't any consequences, but I didn't care what the consequences was. I just walked away.
And then that begins your journey.
This begins my journey. I got into school. I got my GED. From there, I got involved in correspondence courses. I started interacting with guys who were teaching ART, aggression replacement training, and I started to begin to understand how these concepts work, what positive visualization is, deep breathing, how to remove yourself, conflict resolution, all of these ideas of change.
And you use not a single one of those fucking things you learn. I just don't get it, man. You have the opportunity to be able to live your life again, be free after being locked up for so long, and you throw it away for what? But I'm not surprised. That's usually how prison goes. Like, you can always take a person out of prison, but you can't take prison out of a person. But it's just so ironic, him wearing a Queen Defender shirt and literally going back to jail last night, man. What the hell?
Substance abuse. I stopped smoking weed. I stopped smoking cigarettes. I was smoking like 30 cigarettes a day. I'm literally having chest pains from smoking cigarettes. And I realized that I wanted to live. And the only way that I was going to be able to live and walk out of prison was to remove myself from these substances.
And that's where this clip ends on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'll be leaving a link in the description if you want to check out the original video. If you guys like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any other weird podcast moments or anything else you want me to react to, let me know down in the comments and I will definitely get to them. I have a couple videos coming out. Just stay tuned. I have a couple of collab projects with Zero. A very interesting story about this death metal band. Until I see you guys, stay unlovely.